What's up, runners? Welcome to the Let's Run Fit podcast. I'm your host, B Lit. As a running coach, I realized how many runners really wanted to know how to make themselves better and they had no idea how to get there. So here I am to help out any athlete who wants to know more about the sport of running. From the lifelong runner to the brand new runner, there's always something to learn here on the Let's Run Fit podcast. So runners mark, let's go. Hey runners, welcome to the very first episode of Let's Run Fit podcast. I'm so happy that you're here and tuning in with me today. It's going to be so much fun and exciting for all of us to become smarter and stronger runners together. So let's sprint right on in, shall we? So the first thing that I wanted to share with you guys before we got started on anything else was just who I am. So I am a running coach. I coach cross country, distance track, as well as just general athletes of all experience levels that are out in the real world as well. So I kind of have a vast range of ages, experience levels, paces, everything that I do coach here in the running world. I am also a high school science teacher. This is why I love to explore the why behind things, hence the podcast, because I've always been curious ever since I was a child. I actually got awards for it back in elementary school for always being the most curious and asking the most questions, aka being the most annoying child possible, because I always played 20 questions. But this mindset is why I couldn't just be a runner. I couldn't just run without knowing what was actually happening during my run, how I could get better. Like all of that information I had to know. I wanted to know the what and the why behind what I was doing on that just random running plan that I found online that was absolute trash. I'm not going to lie. It was terrible. But I got better once I learned because I went looking for that what and the why. So that's how this podcast came to be, because I wanted to know. And then once I got into the running community where I was working with other athletes after I learned, I realized how many other people had no idea what they were doing. They were just lacing up shoes and going out and hoping for the best and hoping they don't get injured. So from there, I ended up in my first season of coaching high school cross country. This was where I was so blessed to get to work with two other coaches who were so extremely knowledgeable about the world of running as well. One of them in particular actually worked for Road Runners of America and teaches people how to coach. She actually is who taught me how to coach. Ironically, how funny is that, right? So all of these coaches, they were able to give me even more knowledge of how to not only take my knowledge but how to coach that knowledge into others. And all of these athletes, they knew the basics of running and what would help before I even got there, which was fantastic. They knew they needed easy runs. They knew they needed speed work. They knew they needed better mechanics to get better. P.S. If you don't know what those are, we'll get to that later in the season. But I worked in the back of the pack runners that season. We did form and pacing, and it was so amazing to watch those children who didn't have that knowledge yet become those who did. Now, for those of you who don't know much about cross country, this is a fall sport. So during the spring, we switch over to outdoor track. Now, this was the season where I was on my own. So not only was I the head coach of distance runners, but I was the only coach. I had no one else to lean on. Obviously, the other two coaches would answer a text here and there, but I could not rely on them like I did in cross country. So this season, I went from working with the back of the pack to working with the back, the middle, and the front of the pack runners. And this is when I started to see a trend that even though they knew what to do, they didn't know how to implement these aspects into their training in a direct format. So I started having to explain, which is fine. Like, that's the point of a coach, so don't think I'm complaining. But I started to explain what was going on an easy run, how to know the pace, how to get the feel for the speed work, so on, how to make sure your heart rate's in the right zone, make sure you're not running too fast or too slow. And I was so blessed to be able to coach these athletes who were so much smarter than me that once I started to explain how to do these things, they immediately started asking more questions. They wanted to know more of the why and more of the what, not just the small explanation I get them. They wanted to know why I need to do that. Why does that work? What happens when I do that? Why is it better to do this versus what I was doing before? What's the science behind it? And then this one kid, he asked, what research do you have to back this up? Now, to make this kid make sense, he has a full ride to a prestigious university on an academic scholarship. He is absolutely brilliant. So it makes perfect sense why he was wanting the actual research put out there. So I went to go find some research for him, and I found even more research and more reasons for myself. And this made me so happy because my scientist brain just dug into this. So these kids challenged me to find those deeper explanations of what happened. And once I got them on board for these good, proper mechanics, because they didn't always trust me right away, but once they got there, the difference in their running was astronomical. They had a fantastic cross-country season, but when you compare their cross-country season to the track season, it wasn't even the same kids. It was just a huge difference because they were making these ginormous PRs that they hadn't made in years because we took the knowledge that they already had, they knew what to do, but then we explained the why, which made them implement it better. And again, that's why this podcast, because that was when I knew that these kids needed that information. And it's not just those kids, but everyone out there, because normal people are not like me. Normal people are not obsessive in finding those answers. Normal people are not going to dig through medical journals to find research studies like I do and still do to this day. Normal people also didn't have that wonderful kid who was smarter than them on the academic scholarship helping them find this research either. He was such a help. But I learned very quickly that knowing why you need to do something, that seems to be the key of unlocking those huge breakthroughs in training. Then why is what gets you there. So I wanted to get that information out to everybody in an easy to listen to and learn format like my athletes had from me. Just obviously I can't go sit on the sidelines of all of your runs to tell you what to do. So here we are. Welcome to the podcast. So I explained a little bit about my running coaching history. So let me go a little bit more into my history into fitness and running and all of those aspects. So I have always been an athlete. You can ask my parents from the moment I came out, I was always doing something. So in my short, almost 30 years, I have played soccer, basketball, volleyball, ran track, played pickleball, was on a swim team, and had a very, very, very short career in dancing. Let's just say that one didn't really work out. So to give you a quick rundown, as a kid, I didn't have the focus for it. The teacher straight returned my mom's check. She said, "This 5-year-old should not be in a dance class. I am going to give you your money back on the first day as opposed to trying to get through this and not want to kill her." Hence me, the her. So as an adult, once I got out of the age where you were able to have these team sport experiences, I started to kind of flounder. Like, I felt lost. I didn't know what to do. And that's when I kind of started getting into these random fitness things. Like I joined a digital fitness class program. It was great, but I didn't stick with it very well. I started to powerlift, which was fantastic until I had a knee injury that, kind of kicked me out of that. I went and had a personal trainer, which was fantastic until COVID hit. And like most runners these days, that's when I started to truly run again as just running. And this is what changed my life, because I needed a sport. At the time, I was 27 years old. I wanted something that was going to be outside in the beautiful weather that we were having. And as I started, I had a Garmin already, and it would tell me every time I PR'd. And every time I saw that little vibration and stars, just like, "You made a PR today," I was so incredibly proud of myself. But I had no idea what I was doing. No idea what I was doing. I was so lucky I did not get injured. But a few months later of this very lucky running, as I call it, I decided, hey, let's just go do a 5K. I'm already running about 3 to 4 miles at a time anyways, so let's just go do a race. I've always wanted to try it. So I did. And I was hooked instantly. It was freezing cold. And by freezing cold, I literally mean 24 degrees outside in South Carolina. But I got first place in my age group. Yeah, there were only 2 of us, but it still totally counts. I got first place. My name got called. They put a medal on my neck. I was thrilled. But I also love the atmosphere of the runners. Everyone was cheering for everyone else. They lifted everyone up from the fastest to the slowest. No one didn't get cheered for as they crossed that finish line. Everybody was smiling and happy. One person brought cupcakes for everybody, people they didn't even know, and they made hundreds of cupcakes. And we all went the same distance on that 5K. Whether we were the person who ran that 17 minutes, or my 37 minutes, or this other woman's 53 minutes. We all ran the same distance, even though we ran different paces. And we all ran the same race. It was absolutely fantastic, the atmosphere of knowing that even if I wasn't the best, I got to run with the best. And that was such a good feeling. It's something that's very, very, just running related. You don't get to go play in the same game as a professional soccer player or football player or basketball player. You can watch it, but you don't get to play at the same time like you do with running. You get to run on the same courses as the elite professionals in running, which is so amazing. So as you can tell, I just really like the sport of running. I had been obsessively researching, as I had mentioned before. I found out how much of the information I didn't even know I didn't know. I started to fix my running. Suddenly running wasn't painful anymore. I didn't dread it. I had so much more energy. The run didn't end my day like it used to. So this is when I decided I was going to research how to become a coach. I had this head full of knowledge and I wanted to help. So I started to research and learn from other coaches how to apply all of my knowledge to other runners, because it's not as easy as just knowing. So, find out what to look for, what to say, what kind of examples and analogies would help them out. And this is when I started working with other runners directly to help them become stronger in their runs and gain confidence and knowledge and make sure that they were running in a healthy way and not doing all of the mistakes that I did when I first started out, because there was a lot. And once I started coaching, I realized you had to have some type of baseline coaching philosophy. And mine was always just be positive. Anyone can do anything if they believe in themselves. And if I ever coach you now or in the future, just know you're always going to get that encouragement, because that's how I was coached by coaches that were successful. I had coaches that yelled at me and told me that I wasn't this or I wasn't that, and you need to focus harder here and you're not trying, and all of that it ate at me. And those were the people that I hated playing or running or swimming for, because they just made me feel like trash. So why would I want to improve my running? So with that kindness, I still tell you the truth. So don't think that I'm just going to sugarcoat you and tell you that you're all sunshine and rainbows. I tell you guys the truth so you know how to fix it, but I say it in a way that's not rude, so that way you want to learn from it and you can do those small changes, because even the smallest of PRs is a huge, huge accomplishment. Whether you just ran a half a second faster or lifted 30 pounds heavier, it is just this humongous thing. Sometimes your PR can just be that you did the workout, or that you did a 15-minute workout instead of a 10-minute workout. It can just be something small, but a coach should cheer you on even the small goals and not just the big goals. Otherwise, you're just going to feel like you're not accomplishing anything. And also know, if I do coach you in person especially, you're going to get hugged. We come from a hugging family over here, and I will hug you whether you are in last place or first place, because you ran, and you ran faster than everyone who was too scared to even show up and try. So that means you're not last. Even if you're the last across the finish line officially, you still beat 7.8 billion people that day who did not even lace up their shoes and show up. So coaching for me is always a positive experience. But all of this brings me to here, the Let's Run Fit podcast. I mentioned to my athletes that I wanted to do this recently, and they were so excited to be able to get this information, even more than what they already had at practice. Who knew that they'd actually want to hear my voice explaining these aspects of running and working out and health, even more than they already get on a pretty much daily basis, because track and cross country at this point is mostly year round. So they really don't get to get away from me. But on this podcast, I'm going to be explaining the aspects of training, racing, pacing, fueling, nutrition, how to have that life balance with your workouts, depending on what your goals are. It can take a long time. So if, for example, you want to train for a marathon, you've got to learn how to have that run-life balance, because that's a lot of hours of running a week. But if you're just wanting to get healthier, it still can be a life balance, because normally those who are wanting to be healthier, there's a reason they haven't picked up any type of workout yet. So it's trying to figure out how to balance all this together. I'm also going to have lots of interviews with real life runners and athletes and people who are going through this same stuff, like the plateaus, the highs, the lows, going through overtraining, imposter syndrome, not having time, having zero history of workouts and wanting to do it. People who have to live in this world where money isn't abundant and you can't just pay someone to tell you everything, and they're trying to figure it all out on their own. This is not going to be a podcast of just, the highs and the elites and the experts at all times. Sometimes it's just going to be that neighbor down the street who has 3 kids and is trying to figure out her way in the world while also being healthy at the same time. So if you want to learn all aspects of running and life and workouts and nutrition, this is the place for you, and we love that you are here. We love each and every one of you. So to wrap this episode up, because I could just keep going, if you cannot tell, I could just go on and on, but I know that you're ready to learn something. So I am Be Lit, runner, running coach, teacher, and now podcaster. And I'm so excited that you've stayed with me this long, and I can't wait to talk to you all in the future. And if you ever have any running questions or training questions, always just send me a message. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, my email, my website. There's so many places you can find me. And I would love to help you out. And depending on your question, you might even get featured on the podcast. So finally, one last time, I want to say thank you to all who supported me as I started this journey, especially my family and my current athletes. They have been so supportive in this process and helpful. And I want each and every one of you to know how much I love you. Thanks so much, runners, for spending time with me and listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, please hit that subscribe button and leave me a review. I always love to hear from my listeners. And if you want more Let's Run Fit in your life, find me on Instagram at Let's Run Fit with Be Lit. Until next time, runners. The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical or professional advice. Please always consult a medical professional if you're seeking medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The Let's Run Fit podcast is not liable for risk or issues associated with using or acting upon the information in this podcast.